Sometimes, the darkest things aren't in front of you. They're right behind you. Emily was just like any other student, walking home late at night. The streets were empty, the air cold and still. But the moment she heard the footsteps, she knew she was not alone. A strange feeling crept over her, a chilling awareness that something or someone was following her every step. It wasn't the wind, it wasn't her imagination, it was real. And as she reached for her phone, the message appeared, "Don't look behind you." But the question remained, would she listen, or would the nightmare take over? Tonight, on The Silent Screams, we bring you the terrifying true story of Don't Look Behind You. The streets were nearly deserted that night, the kind of silence that presses down on your chest and makes every sound seem too loud. It was just after midnight when Emily left the library, her backpack heavy with books, her eyelids heavier with exhaustion. The campus was quiet behind her, but the road ahead stretched long and lonely, lined with dim street lamps that flickered like they were fighting to stay alive. The further she walked, the more each flicker seemed to carve shadows across the cracked pavement, stretching the trees into distorted figures that swayed unnaturally in the wind. Emily adjusted her coat, pulling it tighter against the night's chill. The air smelled faintly of wet asphalt and decaying leaves, the scent of autumn settling in. She tried to distract herself by scrolling through her phone, but her battery was almost dead, and the screen dimmed to black. That's when she noticed the sound of her own footsteps echoing strangely in the stillness. At first, she thought it was normal. Empty streets always seemed to echo, but there was something off. Each step she took seemed to carry an answer. When her heels struck the ground, there was a faint second step sputter just behind her, slightly delayed, as if someone else was matching her pace, but not quite in sync. She stopped suddenly. The sound stopped too. Her pulse quickened, her eyes darted around, scanning the street. Nothing, just pools of weak lamplight, the outlines of parked cars, and the endless shadows of the trees. The road stretched forward and backward, empty in both directions, but the unease in her chest grew heavier, pressing against her ribs, whispering to her instincts, "You are not alone." Emily swallowed hard and forced herself to walk again, this time quicker, her boots striking the pavement with sharp urgency. The echo followed, quicker, closer. Her skin prickled, and she felt a bead of cold sweat trail down her spine despite the night air. She tried to tell herself it was her imagination, that maybe the sound was bouncing strangely off the buildings. Yet deep inside, she knew better. The street felt wrong, too empty, too still. The silence wasn't comforting, it was waiting. And in that waiting silence, each echoing step behind her sounded less like an echo, and more like a warning. Emily's pace quickened as she tried to shake off the unease gnawing at her mind. She told herself she was being ridiculous, that the empty streets and flickering lights were simply playing tricks on her tired imagination. Yet, the longer she walked, the more she became aware of something deeply unsettling. Her steps weren't the only ones echoing across the pavement. At first, the sound was faint, almost hidden beneath her own rhythm, but once she noticed it, she couldn't unhear it. Every time her heels struck the ground, there came another sound, softer, trailing just behind her. It was slightly offbeat, like an echo that refused to line up perfectly, a fraction of a second too late. Her breath caught in her throat. This wasn't the wind. This wasn't the creaking of branches. This was someone walking. Her heart pounded as she tested it, slowing her stride, her boots dragging against the cracked concrete. The sound behind her slowed to. She froze, her entire body tense, and the footsteps stopped. For a moment, the silence was suffocating, so absolute that she could hear the thundering of her own pulse in her ears. She spun around, her eyes darting through the dark. Nothing, just the empty street stretching endlessly under the dull glow of street lamps. The trees loomed, their skeletal branches swaying, but no one was there. No figures, no movement. The world felt dead. Emily swallowed hard, telling herself she had imagined it, that her exhausted brain was conjuring paranoia out of the night. She turned forward again, forcing her legs to move, trying to focus on the faint golden light of her apartment, building still blocks away. But then the sound came again. Step, step, step. This time closer, sharper, like whoever or whatever was following her had grown bolder. The hair on the back of her neck bristled. She could almost feel the weight of eyes fixed on her back, dragging against her skin like invisible claws. Every nerve in her body screamed for her to run, but fear rooted her feet to the ground. Her throat tightened as she realized the awful truth. This wasn't an echo. It wasn't her imagination. Something was out there, pacing her every move, hidden just out of sight, and it was waiting for her to look back. Emily's pulse throbbed in her ears as she forced her legs to keep moving, every muscle trembling from the weight of unseen eyes drilling into her back. The echo of footsteps behind her had grown so distinct, so undeniable, that each one felt like a countdown. Still, when she spun her head slightly to the side, trying to glimpse something in her peripheral vision, the street remained maddeningly empty. Shadows stretched long and deep across the road, but none of them belonged to anyone. She swallowed hard, fighting the urge to break into a run. The silence pressed down again, heavy and suffocating, broken only by the crunch of her boots on cracked asphalt. That was when her phone buzzed in her pocket. The vibration startled her so violently that she gasped, clutching her bag tighter against her chest. With trembling fingers, she pulled the phone free. The dim glow of the nearly dead screen illuminated her pale face, and there it was, a message from an unknown number. No name, no contact photo, just a blank number she didn't recognize. The message read, "Don't look behind you." Her blood froze. The words sat stark against the screen, black text on a glowing white background, and for a long, terrible moment, she couldn't move. She blinked rapidly, her breath catching in her throat, trying to convince herself it was some kind of prank, maybe one of her classmates, maybe someone who knew she walked this way home. But at midnight, out here, how would they know she was looking over her shoulder right now? Her grip tightened around the phone until her knuckles whitened. She turned her head quickly, scanning the street again. Nothing, just the stretch of lonely road, the skeletal trees swaying, and the faint hum of an old street lamp. Yet the pit in her stomach deepened, because the message felt too precise, too personal. Her thumb hovered over the keyboard as if she could demand an explanation, but her phone buzzed again before she could type. Another message, "I can see you." Emily's chest tightened, panic clawing at her insides. The footsteps resumed, heavier now, echoing in perfect time with her own. She felt the cold certainty settle in. Whoever was behind her wasn't just following, they were watching. They knew. And every instinct inside her screamed the same thing. Whatever happens, whatever you do not turn round. Emily's breath came shallow, each inhale ragged as she stared at the glowing phone screen in disbelief. The message was still there, burning into her eyes as though the words had been carved just for her. "I can see you." Her first instinct was denial. Maybe it was a cruel prank. Maybe some stranger had picked her number at random. But the night was too still, too deliberate. Whoever or whatever was sending these texts knew exactly where she was and what she was doing. Her body stiffened with the weight of invisible eyes, and she felt the back of her neck prickle with a cold, so sharp it bordered on pain. Her legs moved faster now, her steps sharp against the pavement. She tried to force reason into her head. "It's fine, it's just a joke. Get home, lock the door, forget it ever happened." But the dread tightened with every stride, curling like smoke in her lungs. The phone buzzed again in her hand. The vibration rattled her bones. She hesitated, afraid to look, but the compulsion was too strong. "Don't run." Her knees almost buckled. She looked down the road, her apartment still 2 blocks away. Her heart screamed at her to sprint, to put as much distance as possible between herself and whatever lingered behind her. But the words on the screen shackled her with terror. Whoever was sending them knew her impulses, knew her choices. It felt as though the sender wasn't watching her from behind. But inside, the footsteps followed relentlessly, closing the distance. Her ears told her that whoever was there was no more than a few paces away, just outside her vision. Her hand trembled so violently she nearly dropped the phone. She clutched it tighter, praying for a sign, for someone else to appear on the street. But the road stretched forward endlessly, empty and dead. Buzz another message, "Don't scream." Her lips parted, a sound clawing its way up her throat, but the warning stole it before it could escape. Her breaths grew frantic, shallow gasps that did nothing to calm the storm inside her chest. She wanted to call someone, anyone, but the thought of lifting the phone to her ear felt impossible. Like the moment she tried, she'd hear something breathing on the other end. Buzz. "Don't look." Her vision blurred with tears she didn't realize had welled up. Her heart hammered against her ribs so violently she feared it might break free. She tightened her grip on her keys in her other hand, the jagged metal biting into her palm like a lifeline. The silence around her thickened, broken only by the endless footsteps pacing her stride. Emily knew now, whoever was behind her wasn't going to stop, and the messages weren't advice, they were commands. Commands. She wasn't sure she could disobey. The night seemed to change around Emily as she walked, each block more distorted than the last. The air grew colder, biting against her skin even though the season hadn't yet turned to winter. The lamps overhead sputtered weakly, their light faltering like dying candles, stretching the darkness deeper and deeper. The road itself felt wrong no longer somehow, as if the path back to her apartment was stretching away from her. Every step became heavier, as though unseen hands were weighing her down. And still, behind her, the sound of footsteps persisted. They weren't faint anymore. They were sharp, deliberate, perfectly matched to her own. She no longer needed her imagination to hear them. The rhythm thudded against the silence, echoing in the hollow street. Her phone buzzed once more, and though every fiber of her body screamed at her not to look, she couldn't help herself. With trembling hands, she lifted the dim screen. Another message. "I'm closer," she gasped, clutching the phone to her chest. The words felt like ice pressed against her heart. It wasn't a warning anymore, it was a statement of fact. She could feel it now, the presence just beyond the edge of her vision. Her body screamed at her to turn around, to see what stalked her. But the memory of that first message, "Don't look behind you," anchored her. Eyes forward, the shadows around her seemed alive. Each flickering lamp cast shapes across the cracked pavement that twisted and shifted as she moved. Some leaned too far, stretching toward her feet. Others seemed to rise against the walls of buildings, tall and unnatural, swaying in sync with the phantom steps behind her. The trees whispered with the wind, but even their movements looked wrong, branches bending in ways that didn't belong to nature. Her breath came in sharp gasps now, fogging in the cold air. She focused on the faint golden glow of her apartment building down the road. It looked impossibly far, its windows like unreachable stars. Still, she forced her legs forward, whispering to herself like a mantra, "Almost there, almost there." But with every step, the feeling intensified. The footsteps were no longer just sounds. They were a weight, pressing closer, breathing down her neck. She felt the brush of air against her hair, the phantom warmth of something leaning in. Her body stiffened, tears stinging her eyes. Then the buzzing came again. Another message lit up her screen. "Don't think about me, I'm already here." The shadows flickered violently, stretching long across the road until they seemed to reach for her. Emily's knees nearly gave out. She wanted to scream, but her voice was trapped, locked in her chest by terror. All she could do was keep moving, each step dragging her through a darkness that no longer felt like night, but something watching, something waiting, something that wanted her to break the one rule she clung to with every ounce of her willpower. "Don't look behind you." Emily's body trembled with exhaustion and terror, but the messages wouldn't stop. Each vibration in her hand felt like a blade slicing deeper into her nerves. She wanted to throw the phone away, smash it against the pavement, anything to end the torment. But the glowing screen had become the only light she trusted, the only thing tethering her to reality as the night thickened around her. The words were burned into her mind. "Don't run, don't scream, don't look." The commands weren't just instructions anymore. They felt like laws, rules that carried consequences far worse than she could imagine if broken. She clutched the phone tighter, her hands slick with sweat, her breathing shallow and ragged. The footsteps behind her grew louder. They weren't in rhythm with her anymore. They weren't echoes. They were deliberate, dragging, sometimes pausing for a beat too long before resuming with a sudden jolt. It was as if the thing following her wanted her to know it was there, savoring her fear. She could almost hear it inhale between steps, like a predator breathing down her neck. Her mind raced in panic. She considered darting into one of the side streets, hiding between the rows of dark buildings. But her gut twisted with the certainty that if she left the faint light of the main road, she wouldn't come back out. The shadows already moved too freely. The darkness seemed to have its own hunger. Her phone buzzed again. She nearly dropped it. The screen lit up with words that made her legs tremble. "I'm right behind you." Tears blurred her vision. Her body screamed for release, to turn around, to see, to confront whatever nightmare stalked her. But she remembered the first warning, the one that echoed louder than the rest. "Don't look behind you." She clenched her teeth, forcing her gaze straight ahead. Suddenly, the air changed. It grew heavier, thicker, as if the night itself had collapsed around her. Her lungs struggled for breath. The world was silent except for the pounding of her heart and those relentless, dragging footsteps. Even the distant hum of traffic seemed to vanish. The entire universe shrank to just her, her phone, and the thing behind her. Then came another message. The screen glowed brighter than ever, as though the words themselves were alive. "You're almost home." Her stomach twisted. How could it know? How could it know where she lived? The golden glow of her apartment building was faintly visible at the end of the road now. A fragile beacon in the suffocating dark. Relief tried to break through, but fear crushed it down. If it knew her home, there would be no safety waiting for her inside. Her steps turned frantic, stumbling as her legs begged her to run, but she couldn't. The command screamed in her head, "Don't run." If she broke the rules, if she gave in, what would happen? She didn't want to know. The shadows swayed with unnatural life around her, rising tall against the walls, reaching long fingers across the street. They followed her like a crowd, closing in from every angle. Her tears fell freely now, her lips trembling as she whispered to herself over and over, "Almost there, just a little more, please, let me make it." And all the while, the presence behind her grew closer, waiting, anticipating, feeding on every ounce of her terror as she descended deeper and deeper into the nightmare. The faint outline of Emily's apartment building finally came into view. Its windows glowed a muted gold in the distance, fragile against the choking blackness of the night. Relief should have washed over her, but instead, the sight twisted her gut with dread. The building looked impossibly far, its light weak, as though it too were fighting to survive against whatever hunted her. Her steps stumbled, her legs screaming for her to sprint the rest of the way. The phone's warnings rang in her mind. Don't run, don't scream, don't look. Every muscle in her body warred against those rules. She wanted nothing more than to bolt, to scream until someone threw open a window, to turn and face whatever stalked her. But terror was a leash pulling her forward, forcing her into obedience. The footsteps behind her were no longer subtle. They were heavy now, deliberate, crunching the pavement with a force that seemed to shake the ground. She could feel vibrations crawling up her legs with each one, as if the earth itself recoiled from their presence. And worse still, the gap between her and it, whatever it was closing. The sound was too close, too sharp, as though the unseen figure was only an arm's length away. Her throat tightened, her breaths short and ragged. The cold night air clawed at her lungs, making her dizzy. She pressed her keys into her palm, gripping them like a weapon. The jagged metal dug into her skin, a reminder that she was still alive, still fighting. But deep down, she wondered if she turned around, would she see a man, a shadow, or something else entirely, something not meant for this world. Her phone buzzed violently, jolting her from the thought. She nearly dropped it, catching it at the last second with trembling fingers. The message burned across the screen. Don't slow down. Her heart lurched. Had she slowed? She hadn't realized it, but her legs were heavy, sluggish, as though unseen hands were dragging her back. She forced herself forward, each step a battle against invisible chains. The lights of her building wavered in the distance, taunting her with their unreachable glow. Another buzz. I'm waiting inside. Emily's chest collapsed inward, the breath ripped from her lungs. She nearly screamed, clamping her hand over her mouth to stop it. Her building, her one sanctuary, the place she thought would save her, was already compromised. The thought paralyzed her for a split second. If it was true, then there was nowhere left to run. But paralysis was death. She staggered forward, half running despite the command carved into her mind. She couldn't stop. The lights were too close now, the door within reach. Each footstep behind her was a hammer, pounding the final seconds of her sanity into dust. Her tears blurred the world into smudges of shadow and light. Her lips whispered a broken mantra. Almost there, almost there, almost there. The sound behind her grew unbearably loud. No longer just steps, but the grinding of something massive, something heavy, dragging itself into her world. And still, she did not look back. She clung to that rule with every ounce of strength she had left, because she knew, deep in her bones, that the moment her eyes met what followed her, it would all be over. Emily's fingers shook so badly, she nearly dropped the keys. The front door of her apartment building loomed ahead, just a few desperate strides away. Its glass reflected the dim glow of the street lamps, distorted by streaks of rain and dust. Safety seemed to dangle in front of her, close enough to touch, yet tainted by the chilling thought that whatever hunted her might cross the threshold with her. Her phone buzzed again, the vibration rattling her bones. She almost ignored it, too terrified to read more. But the sound was insistent, like a demand she couldn't refuse. With trembling hands, she lifted the screen. The message glowed. Don't look. Her throat tightened, Her instincts screamed at her to turn, to confirm what she already felt breathing down her neck, but the words chained her forward. The weight of the command pressed into her skull like an iron brand. Her legs wobbled as she shoved the key into the lock. It slipped once, then again, as sweat soaked her trembling palms. The footsteps behind her grew louder, deafening, as though the thing following her had abandoned any attempt at subtlety. Each step thundered in her ears, closer and closer, until it felt like its toes brushed against her heels. Her chest heaved. She bit down on a scream, the urge clawing its way up her throat like fire. Buzz. Another message. Don't scream. Emily choked on her breath, muffling the sound with her clenched jaw. Her vision blurred with tears. The key finally slid into the lock, but her hands were shaking so violently she could barely twist it. She felt the faint resistance of the mechanism turning, each second stretching like an eternity. The presence loomed closer still, the air thick with something foul, metallic, like blood and rust. Then came the final buzz, the last message. I'm already inside. Her eyes widened. The phone slipped from her grasp, clattering against the pavement. For a split second she refused to believe it, her mind clawing for rationality. But then her gaze lifted, just slightly, to the reflection in the glass door, and there it was. A figure tall, impossibly tall, loomed in the distorted glass. Its body was a void, a silhouette darker than the night itself. She couldn't make out a face, only the hollow impression of eyes burning from within the shadow. The reflection leaned closer, inches from her, though the space behind her was still empty. When she dared a flicker of a glance downward, Emily's breath fractured into a sob. She twisted the key frantically, praying for the door to give way. But before she could push inside, the light above her flickered violently and went out. The glass turned black, the reflection vanished, and in that instant, the silence behind her was worse than the footsteps had ever been. Emily's heart hammered so violently it felt as if her chest might tear open. The light above the entrance had died, plunging her into a suffocating darkness, broken only by the pale glow of her fallen phone on the ground. Its cracked screen still pulsed faintly with that final damning message. I'm already inside. Her trembling fingers clawed at the key still jammed in the lock. Every twist, every scrape of metal against metal, echoed like thunder in her ears. She could no longer hear her own breath over the pounding in her skull. For one fragile moment, she convinced herself that once the door opened, once she was inside, she would be safe. Then her eyes lifted. The glass door before her caught what little light the street offered, and in that fractured reflection, she saw it. A figure towered behind her taller than any man, its shoulders hunched, yet monstrous in scale, its form smeared and indistinct, like darkness wearing the shape of something human. Where its face should have been was only void, two pits of hollow shadow glowing faintly with a pale, sickly light. It did not move, it did not need to. Its very presence pressed against her spine, a weight that made her legs buckle. Emily's body seized with terror. Her lips parted in a silent scream, but no sound came out. She wanted to turn, to prove to herself the reflection was a lie, a trick of the broken glass, but she couldn't. The rules held her captive. Don't look. The first warning echoed in her mind, relentless, binding her in place, and then the reflection shifted. The figure leaned closer, bending unnaturally, its elongated form stretching until its hollow face hovered just above her shoulder. She felt it then, not imagined, not feared, but real. The icy brush of breath against her ear. Her vision blurred as her knees threatened to give way. The keys rattled in the lock, useless against the oppressive force closing in around her. The street behind her was still empty. She dared one flicker of a glance downward, and there was nothing, no shadow, no body. Yet, in the glass, the figure loomed impossibly clear. Closer now, so close its outline seemed to merge with hers. Her body trembled violently, a sob tearing from her throat at last. She squeezed her eyes shut, praying for the reflection to vanish when she opened them again. For a heartbeat, silence stretched around her, suffocating an absolute dot. Then the glass door rattled, as though something pressed from the other side. The reflection's hollow eyes flared brighter, and its mouth o'er what passed for one split wide into an expressionless void. Emily's scream finally tore free, raw and jagged, but the night swallowed it whole. When morning broke, the city woke to the ordinary rhythm of another day. Commuters filled the streets, cars honked in impatience, and the world carried on, unaware of the terror that had unfolded in the hours before dawn. For Emily, however, there would be no morning, The first sign of something wrong came when the landlord noticed her front door still locked from the outside. The keys dangled from the knob, swaying faintly as though they had been left in a panic. On the ground lay her phone, its screen cracked but still glowing dimly. The final message glared up at him like an accusation. "I'm already inside." There was no sign of Emily, no scattered belongings, no cries for help. The lobby camera caught nothing but static during the night, as though the feed had been swallowed by darkness itself. Neighbors swore they heard nothing, no screams, no struggle, only silence. The police were called, but their investigation was brief, almost perfunctory. They took the phone, bagged the keys, and asked questions no one could answer. Where had Emily gone? Who had been sending those messages? Why did her phone records show no actual number, no traceable source, just empty data, as if the texts had been written by the void itself? Rumors spread quickly. Students at her college whispered about her disappearance, embellishing the tale with each retelling. Some claimed she had been stalked for weeks, that she had confided in friends about footsteps that followed her home. Others swore they had seen her reflection, once alone in a mirror, except her eyes hadn't been her own. The truth was far darker. Late at night, tenants in Emily's building began to report strange occurrences, a faint tapping sound in the hallways, the echo of footsteps that stopped whenever they turned their heads, and the most unsettling of all, a single buzz from their phones at precisely 3 a.m. when they checked. No new message appeared, but their screens often froze on words they swore they never typed. "Don't look behind you." Her case file remained open, but quietly forgotten. Just another missing person in a city already drowning in unsolved mysteries. Yet those who knew her, who dared to walk that same road at night, felt the lingering dread. It was as if Emily's story hadn't ended, it had only shifted, spreading like a stain through every crack in the city. And still, on certain nights, passers-by claimed they saw her, a young woman standing just beyond the reach of the street lamps, her face pale, her body trembling. She never spoke, she never moved, but those who looked too long swore they saw something towering just behind her, something that did not belong in the world of the living. Emily was gone, vanished without a trace, but the warning remained, etched into the memory of those who dared to hear it, whispered through dead phone lines and flickering lights. "Don't look behind you."